Thank you and welcome to the show this morning. The topic this morning is the African-American soldier. And we have with us to talk about the African-American soldier this morning, Dr. DrBLovett, the Dean of Arts and Sciences at Tennessee State University and a professor in the History Department at Tennessee State University. And Dr. Lovett, let me welcome you to the show this morning.
Thank you, Dr. Haney.
Dr. Lovett, what we'd like to do this morning is to recognize that Memorial Day is coming up soon, and one of the things that we'll have an opportunity to talk about during this period will be the soldiers who have given their lives for the freedoms that we enjoy in this great country. But now let's have you to talk about that today. But before we get into a discussion of black soldiers in the various wars that the United States has participated in, let's have you to give us some information about your background, your education, and some of the things that were important to you in leading you to the position that you now hold as the dean, as well as a professor in the History Department at Tennessee State University.
Well, Dr. Haney, I'm a native of Memphis, Tennessee, born, raised in Memphis, finished Booker T. Washington High School, attended Arkansas A&M State College, where I received my Bachelor's of Arts in History and Political Science. Went on to the main university, University of Arkansas, where I received my Master's of Arts and my PhD degree. And I've done studies at Howard in statistical research and since my doctorate, and also at Columbia University in political science in New York. I've been at Tennessee State University 23 years. Previously, I was at Eureka College in Illinois.
Very good. You know, Dr. Lovett, I think one of the things that a lot of folks don't know is that, that the African-American soldier played a significant role in a number of the military engagements that the United States was involved in during the history of this country. And let's have you to start by, first of all, giving us some information about the African in the New World. Not necessarily the United States, but the African in the New World. Let's talk about that and then move on to talk about some of the other areas.
Well, people of African descent have been here for hundreds of years on this side of the world. And most of them are the results of Western slavery, which started in the 1500s, around 1513. And some 15 million or more were removed from Africa and brought into the New World. Most of them and their descendants live south of us. Only about 500,000 of that 15 million were brought into what we call the continental United States. So most persons of African descent live south of us, and African Americans who live in the United States are a very small number of the persons of African descent who live on this side of the world. And indeed, African people were trading between the New World and Africa long before Columbus came in 1492, and they principally, of course, traded with people in Central and South America.
Very good. You know, when we talk about the discovery of America in 1492, as you mentioned just a minute ago, one of the important things about the discovery of America is it is out of that discovery that came what would eventually become the United States of America. And let's have you to give our audience some information about America before it became the United States of America, perhaps America during the early colonial period, as it was often called, and how blacks fit into that whole scheme of things.
Well, as I said, if you read some books like Sertima, whose book is They Came Before Columbus, very good book for people to start, of course. He documents convincingly what data from anthropologists and archaeologists, as well as history stories from Native Americans, or what some people call Indians, the African presence in North and South America long before Columbus. And in fact, there were Africans on board with Columbus's 3 ships when they made their initial arrival into the Caribbean Sea. As you know, Columbus never set foot on the North American continent. He always arrived in the Caribbean area because they were actually navigating the currents of the Atlantic Ocean, which will take you from the western part of Africa across the Atlantic and right into the Caribbean Sea because of the clockwise circulation of water in the Atlantic, in the North and the South Atlantic Seas. And by the time he set sail in 1492, indeed, about 25,000 Africans lived in Spain, in that part of Iberia at that time. And so they were hired aboard ships just like any other persons looking for jobs. They were low-paying jobs, hazardous jobs, especially if you didn't know where you were going. But they did have African navigators aboard who had navigated those particular waters of the Central Atlantic. And so the first Africans to arrive in North America as settlers, of course, come as indentured servants or bondsmen or slaves. Although slavery was not officially begun in the North American colonies until 1661 in Virginia, when they stopped freeing blacks who were indentured servants, as they freed Englishmen who were indentured servants. And let me add that bondage was fairly common in that day and time, that we forget that over half of all American settlers came in bondage. They either came as African slaves or they came as European indentured servants. But most people who came to the colonies came in voluntarily.
And so there was a very, very difficult social status for African Americans as well as other people during the early part of the colonial period.
Right, bondage was fairly common, and because it was so common, there was a tremendous amount of miscegenation in colonial times. That, when I say miscegenation, that is sexual relations between persons of different colors. And there was a tremendous amount of social exchange because whether you were from Africa or Europe, you worked on the same farm, you worked for the same master. You did have an advantage if you were European of ultimately, after 11 years being freed, taught a trade and given a suit of clothes and possibly some land. For Africans, there was no hope. They could be legally held as property forever by that particular owner. But because of that, let me give an example. Mulattoes in colonial times.
Now these were mixed.
These are persons who are half European, half African ancestry. And most mulattoes had European mothers, not African mothers, because 80% of all the slaves who were brought from Africa were males. And so only 20% were females. And as a result, especially in the West Indies, but also in North America, there were no native natural mates for African slaves, so they took their mates from European indentured women and their mates from Native American, or what we call Indian. And that is why a lot of historians and others and sociologists say if you really want to know what happened to the American Indian, look at the Negro, because he was biologically absorbed into the African people who came here as slaves. And of course, most mulattoes, they will trace their ancestry to a European mother.
So, Dr. DrBLovett, in 1776, the colonies declared their independence from England. Right. Now, when we look at that first event, when we talk about the participation of African-American soldiers during this period, when we look at that first event, exactly what were Africans doing this period? What were they involved in during this period?
Well, you know, slaves, most of them were slaves in the 13 American colonies. There were about 10% who were free persons of color, as always.
Dr. Love, we're going to have to take a break here, and we'll be back with you after this. We'll be back with you short following this.